Life doesn't reward innocence. It rewards awareness. You think people succeed because they play fair? No. People succeed because they understand the shadows everyone else avoids. While you were told to be nice, be kind, play by the rules, the people who run this world were learning a completely different game. They were mastering skills that no teacher ever mentioned, skills that no parent ever explained, skills that society pretends don't exist. I'm talking about shadow skills. These are psychological abilities formed through adversity, observation, and self-mastery. They're not taught in school or books. They're forged in the fires of real experience, in the moments when life strips away your illusions and shows you how the world actually works. These skills are a hidden human advantage that most people spend their entire lives ignoring. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds manipulative, maybe even dangerous. Let me be clear about something right now. These skills are not for harm. They're for protection. They're for people who are tired of being blindsided, manipulated, or underestimated. They're for people who have watched others walk all over them while they stood there wondering why being good never seemed to be enough. I've been where you are. I've felt that burning frustration of watching people who seem less capable, less honest, less deserving somehow end up ahead while I played by rules that apparently nobody else was following. I've felt that sick realization that the world operates on a frequency I wasn't tuned into, and that my ignorance wasn't protecting my innocence. It was making me a target. Today, you're going to learn 7 shadow skills that separate the easily controlled from the impossible to break. These aren't just concepts. These are weapons for your mind, armor for your soul, and tools that will fundamentally change how the world responds to you. By the time we're done, you'll understand why some people seem untouchable while others get consumed by every storm that comes their way. Shadow skill 1. Emotional stillness. The first shadow skill is emotional stillness. This is your ability to control your internal reactions, so external forces lose control over you. Listen to this carefully. Emotional neutrality increases cognitive clarity. When you're not being jerked around by every emotional trigger someone throws at you, your mind becomes a precision instrument instead of a chaos machine. Most people are emotional pinballs. Someone says something, they react. Something happens, they respond immediately. They're constantly being moved by forces outside themselves, and they think this makes them authentic, genuine, real. What it actually makes them is controllable. When someone can predict your emotional responses, they own you. Emotional stillness means you don't react instantly. You don't mirror other people's chaos. You don't let their urgency become your emergency or their anger become your anger. Stillness becomes your weapon because it disarms attackers and prevents manipulation. When someone is trying to provoke you and you remain calm, they lose their script. They expected you to explode, to defend, to explain, to engage in their drama. Your stillness forces them to confront their own behavior instead of hiding behind your reaction. Think about the last argument you had. Really think about it. What if instead of matching their energy, instead of defending yourself, instead of trying to make them understand your point, you had simply remained still? What if you had listened without reacting, spoken without emotion, and responded from a place of choice rather than impulse? I learned this the hard way. I spent years getting triggered by every slight, every criticism, every perceived disrespect. I thought standing up for myself meant fighting back immediately. What I didn't understand was that my reactivity was exactly what people were counting on. They knew if they pushed the right buttons, I would explode. And in that explosion, I would lose credibility, lose control, and ultimately lose whatever I was fighting for. Emotional stillness applies everywhere. During arguments, you remain calm while they lose composure, and observers see you as the reasonable one. Under workplace pressure, you stay focused while others panic, and leadership notices your stability. In relationship emotional traps, you don't take the bait when someone is trying to start a fight, and you either diffuse the situation or reveal their true intentions. But here's the ethical reminder. You use stillness to stabilize situations, not to dominate people. The goal isn't to become emotionally unavailable or cold. The goal is to respond from choice rather than reflex, to engage from strength rather than reactivity. Now that you control the internal battlefield, let's move to how you position yourself in the external world. Shadow skill. 2. Strategic presence. The second shadow skill is strategic presence. This is your ability to show up when it matters and disappear when it doesn't. Here's a psychological truth that will change your life. Scarcity increases perceived importance. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. The more selective you are with your presence, the more impact you have when you do show up. Most people think being everywhere makes them important. They think saying yes to everything makes them valuable. They think being constantly available makes them indispensable. What it actually makes them is taken for granted. When you're always there, people stop appreciating your presence because they assume it's guaranteed. Strategic presence means understanding that not every room deserves your time. Not every conversation deserves your input. Not every debate deserves your voice. You pick your moments the way a chess player picks attacks, carefully, deliberately, with maximum impact. I used to be the person who showed up to everything. Every meeting, every social gathering, every group chat conversation. I thought this made me engaged, committed, part of the team. What it actually did was make me invisible. My voice became background noise because people expected it. My presence became wallpaper because it was always there. The moment I started becoming more selective, everything changed. When I spoke, people listened because they knew I didn't speak unless I had something worthwhile to say. When I showed up, people noticed because my presence wasn't guaranteed. When I committed to something, people valued it because they knew I had other options. Think about social dynamics. The person everyone wants at their party isn't the person who comes to every party. It's the person who comes to the right parties, brings the right energy, and knows when to leave while people still want more. In negotiations, the person with the most power isn't the one who talks the most or argues the longest. It's the one who speaks selectively, listens strategically, and isn't afraid to walk away. In team leadership, the most effective leaders aren't the ones micromanaging every detail. They're the ones who show up when their presence adds value, who speak when their words carry weight, and who trust their team enough to not need constant oversight. But here's the ethical use. You use presence to add impact, not to intimidate. Strategic presence isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about understanding your own value and not diminishing it through overexposure. It's about being intentional with your energy and selective with your investments. Shadow skill. 3. Silent information gathering. The third shadow skill is silent information gathering. This is your ability to learn more by listening than others learn by speaking. Here's something that will blow your mind. People expose themselves through unfiltered talk. When someone is comfortable, when they think you're just listening passively, when they believe you're not a threat, they reveal everything. Their motivations, their insecurities, their real agenda, their pressure points. It all comes out if you know how to create the space for it. Most people are terrible listeners because they're too busy preparing what they're going to say next. They miss critical information because they're more interested in being heard than in understanding. They interrupt. They assume. They project their own thoughts onto what others are saying. This makes them blind to what's actually happening around them. Silent information gathering means you train yourself to observe rather than rush to respond. You listen not just to words but to tone, timing, what's not being said, what's being emphasized, what triggers emotional responses. You become a detective of human behavior, gathering intelligence that others miss because they're too busy performing. I remember being in business meetings where I used to feel pressure to contribute something, to prove I belonged in the room. I would interrupt with ideas, argue with points I disagreed with, try to demonstrate my knowledge. I was so focused on proving myself that I missed everything that was actually important. I missed the real power dynamics, the unspoken agreements, the hidden agendas that were shaping every decision. When I learned to sit back and listen, really listen, everything became clear. I could see who actually had influence and who was just making noise. I could identify the real decision makers versus the people who just like to hear themselves talk. I could spot the alliances, the tensions, the opportunities that everyone else was too busy talking to notice. In friend groups, the quiet observer often understands the group dynamics better than anyone else. They see who's really loyal, who's playing games, who's genuine, who's performing. In conflict situations, the person who listens first often finds solutions that the people who jump straight to arguing never discover. But here's the crucial point. Information is for protection, not exploitation. You're not gathering intelligence to hurt people or manipulate situations. You're developing awareness to make better decisions, to protect yourself from deception, and to navigate complex social situations with wisdom rather than blindness. Shadow skill 4. Boundary precision. The fourth shadow skill is boundary precision. This is your ability to enforce limits calmly, firmly, and early. Here's a psychological truth that most people learn too late. People treat you the way you train them. Every time you allow disrespect, you're teaching people that disrespecting you is acceptable. Every time you fail to enforce a boundary, you're communicating that your boundaries are negotiable. Most people are terrible at boundaries because they think boundaries are mean. They think saying no makes them selfish. They think standing up for themselves makes them difficult. So they let people cross lines over and over until they explode or until they become bitter and resentful. Boundary precision means you don't give emotional explanations for your limits. You don't over-justify your decisions. You don't negotiate your non-negotiables. You speak in clear, minimal statements and you mean what you say. When someone tries to pressure you, guilt you, or manipulate you into changing your position, you don't engage with the manipulation. You restate your boundary. I used to be a people pleaser. I said yes when I meant no. I made excuses instead of setting boundaries. I explained my decisions like I needed permission to make them. I thought this made me kind, accommodating, easy to work with. What it actually made me was a doormat. People learned they could push me, pressure me, guilt me into doing what they wanted. My kindness became weakness, and my accommodating nature became an invitation for others to take advantage. Learning boundary precision changed everything. When someone asks me to do something I don't want to do, I say no clearly, and I don't apologize for it. When someone tries to manipulate me emotionally, I don't engage with the manipulation. I restate my position. When someone repeatedly disrespects me, I don't explain why it's wrong. I remove myself from the situation. Think about saying no respectfully. You don't say, I'm sorry, I can't, I wish I could, maybe another time, let me think about it. You say no, that doesn't work for me, period. No explanation required, no apology necessary. When ending manipulative conversations, you don't argue about whether the manipulation is happening. You say, I'm not comfortable with this conversation, and you leave. When preventing repeated disrespect, you don't explain why respect is important. You make it clear that disrespect equals distance. But here's the ethical use. You're not controlling others. You're protecting yourself. Boundary precision isn't about dominating people or making them submit to your will. It's about taking responsibility for your own experience and refusing to be a victim of other people's inability to respect limits. Shadow skill 5. Pattern anticipation. The fifth shadow skill is pattern anticipation. This is your ability to predict people's actions by recognizing emotional and behavioral patterns. Here's what most people don't understand. Human behavior is repetitive under stress and desire. People think they're unpredictable, but they're actually incredibly consistent once you understand their patterns. Most people react to behavior instead of predicting it. They're constantly surprised by actions they should have seen coming. They trust words over patterns. They believe promises over track records. They hope for change instead of preparing for consistency. This leaves them vulnerable to disappointment, manipulation, and betrayal. Pattern anticipation means you learn to sense intentions early. You see moves before they happen. You stop being surprised by human behavior because you understand that people tend to do what they've always done, especially under pressure. You watch how someone treats others, and you know how they'll eventually treat you. You observe how someone handles stress, and you know how they'll handle the next crisis. I used to get blindsided constantly. Someone would betray me, and I'd be shocked. Someone would let me down, and I'd be devastated. Someone would reveal their true character under pressure, and I'd be surprised. I kept thinking each situation was unique, that this time would be different, that people would change. I was analyzing individual events instead of recognizing patterns. When I started paying attention to patterns, everything changed. I could see relationship red flags before investing emotionally. I could spot unreliable people before depending on them. I could predict workplace drama before getting caught in it. I stopped being a victim of sudden betrayals because I learned to recognize the warning signs that everyone else ignored. In dating dynamics, you watch how someone treats service workers, how they talk about their ex-partners, how they handle disappointment. These patterns tell you everything about how they'll treat you when the honeymoon phase ends. In workplace competition, you observe who takes credit for group successes, who deflects blame for failures, who builds others up versus who tears them down. These patterns predict exactly how they'll behave when advancement opportunities arise. In a friendships and loyalty test, you notice who's there during your struggles, who gossips about others to you, who keeps confidences versus who shares them. These patterns reveal who deserves your trust and who's just performing friendship when it's convenient. But remember the ethical use. You use foresight to make wise decisions, not to set traps. Pattern recognition is about protecting yourself and making informed choices, not about manipulating others or creating self-fulfilling prophecies. Shadow skill. 6. Controlled vulnerability. The sixth shadow skill is controlled vulnerability. This is your ability to reveal only the parts of yourself that strengthen connection while never exposing the parts that weaken your position. Here's a psychological insight that changes everything. Selective openness increases trust and influence. People connect with authenticity, but they lose respect for weakness. The key is knowing the difference. Most people think vulnerability means sharing everything. They think authenticity requires total transparency. They confuse emotional dumping with genuine connection. So they overshare with people who haven't earned that level of access. They expose their deepest insecurities to people who might use them as weapons, and they wonder why their openness doesn't create the intimacy they expected. Controlled vulnerability means you share enough to be relatable while hiding enough to remain protected. You reveal struggles you've overcome, not wounds that are still bleeding. You show your humanity without advertising your weaknesses. You create connection through selective disclosure, not through emotional exhibitionism. I used to think that being real meant sharing all my problems, all my fears, all my insecurities with anyone who would listen. I thought this made me authentic, genuine, someone people could relate to. What it actually did was make me appear unstable, needy, and emotionally exhausting. People started avoiding me because being around me felt like being in therapy session they didn't sign up for. Learning controlled vulnerability revolutionized my relationships. I learned to share stories of challenges I'd overcome rather than problems I was currently drowning in. I learned to reveal enough humanity to be relatable without exposing so much vulnerability that people lost confidence in my stability. I learned that people connect with strength that admits struggle, not weakness that wallows in it. In leadership, people follow someone who's overcome adversity, not someone who's currently falling apart. They want to see that you've been tested and emerged stronger, not that you're currently being tested and crumbling. In romance, attraction grows from shared vulnerability, not from emotional rescue scenarios. Your partner wants to know you're human, not that they need to fix you. In social circles, people are drawn to those who can acknowledge their flaws with humor and perspective, not those who use every conversation as an opportunity for emotional purging. The goal is connection, not sympathy. Here's the ethical use. Authenticity, not manipulation. Selective doesn't mean deceptive. You're not lying about who you are or hiding your true self. You're being strategic about when, how, and with whom you share your deepest truths. You're understanding that not everyone deserves access to your full story, and that protecting yourself emotionally isn't dishonesty, it's wisdom. Shadow skill. 7. Outcome-focused thinking. The seventh shadow skill is outcome-focused thinking. This is your ability to ignore distractions and act only on what moves you toward results. Here's a psychological insight that will transform your life. The brain performs better with singular focused decision-making. When you're clear about what you want and ruthlessly focused on actions that get you there, you become unstoppable. When you're scattered across multiple priorities and emotional reactions, you become ineffective. Most people are addicted to being right instead of being successful. They waste energy arguing points that don't matter. They get distracted by emotional reactions that don't serve their goals. They defend their ego instead of advancing their interests. They confuse activity with achievement and mistake drama for progress. Outcome-focused thinking means you stop arguing for the sake of arguing. You stop proving points that don't change anything. You stop defending your emotions when they don't lead to better results. You conserve energy for the actions that actually matter, and you measure everything against one question. Does this move me closer to what I want? I used to get caught up in every argument, every perceived slight, every injustice. I would spend hours defending my position in conversations that had no winners. I would waste emotional energy on people whose opinions didn't affect my life. I would fight battles that, even if I won them, wouldn't improve my situation. I was so focused on being right that I forgot to focus on being successful. Outcome-focused thinking changed everything. Instead of arguing with people who disagreed with me, I focused on connecting with people who could help me. Instead of defending my ideas to critics, I refined my ideas based on useful feedback. Instead of fighting for respect from people whose respect didn't matter, I invested in relationships that actually advanced my goals. In career strategy, this means focusing on skills and relationships that directly impact your advancement, not on office politics that make you feel important, but don't change your trajectory. In personal discipline, this means doing things that actually improve your life, not things that just make you feel like you're working hard. In conflict resolution, this means solving problems rather than winning arguments. The ethical use is crucial. Your results should lift your life and the lives of others, not erase compassion. Outcome-focused thinking isn't about becoming cold or selfish. It's about being strategic with your energy so you can achieve goals that benefit everyone involved. It's about understanding that the greatest gift you can give others is your success, not your struggle. Bringing it all together. Let me recap these 7 shadow skills that separate the easily controlled from the impossible to break. Emotional stillness. Controlling your internal reactions so external forces lose control over you. Strategic presence. Showing up when it matters and disappearing when it doesn't. Silent information gathering. Learning more by listening than others learn by speaking. Boundary precision. Enforcing limits calmly, firmly, and early. Pattern anticipation. Predicting people's actions by recognizing emotional and behavioral patterns. Controlled vulnerability. Revealing only the parts of yourself that strengthen connection. Outcome-focused thinking. Ignoring distractions and acting only on what moves you toward results. These skills work together. Your emotional stillness gives you the clarity to gather information effectively. Your information gathering helps you anticipate patterns accurately. Your pattern recognition helps you set boundaries precisely. Your boundaries protect the energy you need for strategic presence. Your strategic presence amplifies your controlled vulnerability. Your controlled vulnerability builds the relationships you need for outcome-focused thinking. Here's your implementation challenge. Choose one shadow skill. Don't try to master all 7 at once. That's a recipe for mastering none. Pick the one that speaks to your current situation, the one that addresses your biggest vulnerability, the one that excites you most. Practice it for the next 5 days. Watch how fast people start treating you differently. Maybe you choose emotional stillness because you're tired of being triggered by every comment, every criticism, every attempt to provoke you. Maybe you choose strategic presence because you're exhausted from being everywhere for everyone and getting taken for granted. Maybe you choose boundary precision because you're done being a doormat for people who see kindness as weakness. Whatever you choose, commit to it completely. Don't half-ass it. Don't make excuses. Don't quit when it feels uncomfortable. These skills feel foreign at first because they're the opposite of what society taught you. You were taught to react, to please, to explain, to be available, to share everything, to prove yourself, to fight every battle. These shadow skills require you to think differently, act differently, be differently. And here's what I need you to understand. Power without conscience destroys. Power with intention transforms. These skills are not about becoming manipulative, cold, or selfish. They're about becoming someone who can't be manipulated, who won't be taken advantage of, who refuses to be a victim of other people's dysfunction. You're learning these skills not to hurt others, but to protect yourself, not to dominate others, but to stop being dominated, not to become heartless, but to stop giving your heart to people who don't deserve it, not to stop caring, but to start caring strategically. The world is not a fair place. The world is not a kind place. The world does not reward innocence or good intentions or playing by rules that no one else follows. But the world does respect strength. The world does respond to confidence. The world does yield to people who understand how human psychology actually works. You can choose to remain naive and hope that goodness is enough. You can choose to keep believing that if you just try harder, care more, give more, people will treat you with the respect you deserve. You can choose to stay in the fantasy that the world operates on the principles you were taught in kindergarten. Or you can choose to see clearly. You can choose to understand the game that everyone else is already playing. You can choose to develop the skills that actually work in the real world. You can choose to become the kind of person who walks into any room and remains unshaken. Someone the world cannot intimidate, manipulate, or break. The choice is yours. You can remain a victim of your own innocence, or you can become the author of your own power. You can keep getting surprised by human behavior, or you can start anticipating it. You can continue being reactive, or you can become strategic. These shadow skills are not just concepts. They're not just ideas to think about. They're tools for transformation. They're weapons against a world that will consume your energy, exploit your kindness, and take advantage of your goodness if you let it. They're armor against people who see your decency as a weakness and your trust as stupidity. Master these skills and you'll never again wonder why bad things happen to good people. You'll understand that good people need to be smart people. Kind people need to be strong people. Honest people need to be aware people. Caring people need to be careful people. You'll become someone who can love without losing yourself, trust without being naive, help without being exploited, succeed without sacrificing your integrity. You'll become impossible to break, impossible to manipulate, impossible to control. That's the person you were meant to be before the world convinced you that strength was cruelty and boundaries were selfishness. That's the person you can become when you stop apologizing for your power and start wielding it with purpose. The shadows are not evil. The shadows are where real strength is forged. Step into them, master them, emerge from them transformed. Your old self ends here. Your new self begins now.